guys, welcome to my channel. So today we'll be talking about, I said I'll make a video explaining the four modules of the German language, and today we'll be talking about Hören, Verstehen, listening comprehension, which is also a very important thing in day-to-day as a day-to-day conversation here in Germany, and of course it's really important. So with Hören, as someone who is still learning the language, I would recommend podcasts 100%. Of course, normally in school they do practice. Of course, they do practice too. They do some few exercises that you guys have to listen and write down and stuff like that. But then regular listening is very important, and that's why I'm recommending a podcast, a German podcast in German, and of course watching videos in German too. And then if possible, music too in German. Everything that you have to listen with your ear should be in German. But what I would actually say helped me a lot was a podcast. And then podcast I could say I started listening to podcasts in B1. And I would say there are podcasts when you type, the podcasts are going to appear on Spotify. You get them on Spotify. They will appear based on the level. So if you're in A1, you type podcast for A1, you get them. So you type podcast for any of the corresponding level, and then you're going to get them. Podcasts, they helped me a lot. This is why I'm recommending it 100%. When I started learning the language, I do have some little problem with the slogan and stuff like that. But I was still having good grades. I always had, maybe if the test is on 30, I can have 26, 27. But that was for Hören. Other modules I used to have maybe 30 on 30, 29 on 30 and stuff like that. So that's why I had some little bit of difficulty with it. Then when I got into B1, I had the highest difficulty, because in A1 and A2 with their Hören, as I said, you just listen and you write down what you hear. A1 and A2, you listen and you write down what you hear. You're going to fill the blank spaces based on what you're hearing. But starting from B1 is something else. You now write down what you comprehend, not what you hear. So you have to listen to it and comprehend, like, what is this text talking about? Yeah, that is it. You are not always going to write down what you hear, because, for example, in the Hören, I will take an example. Maybe you can say, okay, it's a good example, like, for example, for Brenda, she created her company in 1988, and then the company maybe was recognized in 1989, and then her new workers, she employed workers in 1990 and stuff like that, you understand? Now, in your Hören, you are going to hear all these dates. So what comes in now is comprehension. The question now, they're going to give you a question. I mentioned already when it was created, when it was recognized, and when she got employees. So now, for example, on your question paper, they're going to choose one of that option, maybe when it was created or whatever, and write it down. So now, in your Hören, you're going to get all these 3 dates. So this is where the comprehension comes in. Then you should be able to pick the date that's talking about when it was created. That is it. That's how a typical example of how B1 works. I just decided to use a very short example. But in A1 and A2, it's not like that. In A1 and A2, you're just going to hear, they're just going to say, make it very simple actually. They're just going to say, this company, especially in A1, they'll just say Brenda created her company in 1988, for example. And then the question is just going to be there, when was the company created, stuff, something like that, for you just to fill it out. So once you hear 1988 or whatever, you already know that, okay, this is the answer to the question. You don't even need to stress, and you're just going to hear just that one date. But as for B1, it becomes more complicated, because they want to be sure that you're understanding it, that you're understanding what you're listening to, that you really and that is it. That was just a very good typical example. So when I got a B1, I had some difficulty, because it was difficult for me to always comprehend it and pick out the answers, because in most of the case, 95% of the case, all the answers you're seeing on your question is in the Hören. They have said it there. All those options are there. And then based on the examples I gave, the example I just gave now, it's for you now to understand which answer is related to this particular question. So this is where listening comprehension comes in. So it's not just, you have to, so as someone, as an individual, I don't rush and say, oh, I've heard 1988, and then you mark it down. But maybe the question was not talking about 1990, maybe 1980 was talking about when it was created, and now you're talking about what you've heard, or when she got her first employee, then you failed that question. That's just the reality, like the picture of Hören, how it looks like, especially for intermediate levels and stuff like that. And of course, you need vocabulary and all that. So that's why I recommend always listening to podcasts. It helps me a lot. So when I had that difficulty, what I did was I asked a classmate of mine. She was also very good at Hören. She just told me, when I listen to German podcasts, girls, I didn't play with it. I went and I started listening to podcasts. That was it. It helps me like a magic, because when you're listening to the podcast, first thing, the Aussprache, how they speak, your ear is going to automatically adapt to it, the speed. And most importantly, the Aussprache, because if you don't understand their pronunciation, you won't also be able to even get the verb. So my ear already got adapted, got used to the pronunciation, how these people pronounce their word, that okay, this is the word. So of course, if your ear is already used to that, then you'll be able to understand when they speak. And of course, the higher you go, the faster they speak. For example, intermediate level, they're going to speak faster than maybe in A1 or A2 and stuff like that. So that's why even when you're typing a podcast, you always specify your level where you are, because it's not just practicing you on the Aussprache, which is the pronunciation. It's also practicing you on the Geschwindigkeit, which is the speed. How do they speak? How fast do they speak? Because as an individual who wants to move to Germany or study in German, whatever, you also need to, your ears need to be adapted to how the people speak the speed, because normally in reality is they speak very fast. So if you're someone who is used to maybe slow German and stuff like that, it's going to disturb you. You won't be able to understand it. So listening to those podcasts will help you, your ear, to adapt to it faster. And this apply the same for videos, and some videos even have subtitles too, which is also very, very helpful. Yeah. So with this, trust me, you're just going to improve on your Hörverstehen. You're just going to improve on your listening comprehension as fast as possible without any stress. And of course, this requires to regular practice. You have to practice regularly, otherwise you won't still get, your ear won't still get used to it. So you have to practice your ear in such a way that when you're listening to it, your ear should be like, oh, I have heard this. Yeah, that's it. So guys, I think I'm done for today. For now, this is all I can say about Hören, and of course maybe I'm going to make other videos in the future. But this is all I can say for now. So guys, thank you all for watching my videos. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Please support your girl. And I just started this channel, and of course I need your support to go on. Thank you guys so much.